Now for a game which I saw live and which I was quite impressed by, between Hare Krishna and Kamsky from the India-USA match in the Istanbul Olympiad 2010, where Hare Krishna used a line of the anti-martial, which is traditionally regarded as quite innocuous, but managed to pose enough problems for Kamsky to make a mistake. So after the standard martial move order, White opted for A4 and B4, and now D4, D6, and exchange on D5, exchange on E5, exchange on D8, and played knight D2. So we have this symmetrical pawn structure, at least in the center, after the exchange on E5. But one of the reasons why Black needs to be slightly attentive here is because he has certain weaknesses on the queen side. So in particular, the C4 square is an outpost for the White knight. In addition, because the pawn has moved to B4, White has ideas of A5 and bishop A4. So Black needs to be quite precise, I think, in his defense of this endgame. Although this is a standard playable theoretical position, and certainly this game does nothing to displace that verdict. Kamsky used this move, bishop c5. I understand that this was introduced by Sargsyan in a game against Bologan in 2008, where Bologan also opted, as did Hare Krishna, for h3. The idea being that after knight c4, bishop e6, Black has this resource of knight takes e4, and Bologan goes on to assess the position after this. As equal, in view of Black's tactical idea of playing for the exchange of another pair of rooks. So h3 doesn't go in for that. Black plays bishop b7, but now, whereas Bologan played bishop c4 and subsequently a5, Hare Krishna plays a5 directly with a view to bringing this bishop to a4, where it proves quite strong. So Kamsky continues h6, bishop a4, and knight d7 to protect the e-pawn, knight b3 hitting the bishop moves away, bishop e3. So it's all very logical, and Kamsky, I think, handles this part of the game quite well also. Brings his knight back to b8 in order, after knight d2, to play bishop c6, trading the bishops. Knight c4, take, knight c6. Now White wouldn't have a huge amount after knight takes d6, pawn takes d6, in particular because Black would have counterplay down the c-file, aiming at this c2 pawn. So instead, Hare Krishna just continues solidly improving his position. Rook e1, bishop e7, rook a1. The king came to the center, and now Kamsky prepares to exchange rooks on the d-file, which Hare Krishna agrees to, but only on his own terms. So rook d5. So clearly Black can't take that directly, because after he takes d5, the knight's hit, and the e5 pawn is going to be dropping. So instead f6, defending that pawn, and now Hare Krishna just prepares play against the e5 pawn, and after bishop d6, rook a1, taking on f4, taking on d6, taking on f4. All of this, I think, is very logical and sensible. But here Kamsky makes a mistake, because he plays rook e6. The best move, it seems, was to take on d5, because after e takes d5, black can exploit this pin to go king f7. He can't go knight e7 directly because white would just win with rook e1. Followed by, say, after rook d7, bishop takes b4, and then taking twice on e7 with a winning king and pawn ending. But king s7 tidies black's position up enough. And after, for instance, rook d3, knight e7, the position is roughly level, because the d5 pawn is going to drop in exchange for the b4 pawn. So that would have been a reasonable end to the game. Rook e6 instead gives white, it seems, some considerable advantage, or at least a solid advantage, because now black can't relieve the pressure by taking on d5, and this rook can come into play against the pawn on g7. So after rook e8, rook g1, g5, h4, black is certainly struggling in this position. Matters weren't helped with b3, c3, and now just this weakness on g5 is very difficult to defend. Clearly black can't take, of course, because the white rook would penetrate with decisive threats either to g8 or to g7. So instead Kamsky tried rook b5, but now he5, and now rook h1. So suddenly all of the white pieces are extremely active, and are taking part in an attack against the black king. And after g4, in fact, white was able to bring in his final piece, namely the king. And rook e7 was tried, but after bishop takes e7, Kamsky resigned because, well, there are a couple of ways to go about this, but ultimately this continuation is decisive, because black's simply getting mated. So, yeah, a game which initially I thought was a very smooth win for Hare Krishna, but ultimately when you look at it a bit deeper, you see that Kamsky had this resource on move 32, but still indicating the depths of strategic subtlety which can exist even after the exchange on e5, in particular where both sides have weaknesses on the queen side.